Hey, welcome to The Hours, a SAVI coaching podcast. I'm Tyler. I'm here with my new friend Ben, who is the director and head coach of Esports. And we got to do a little training with he and the entire athletic department. And I was just fascinated, Ben, by how sharp you are in your approach and really just learning how coaching is coaching, no matter what you're coaching. So I wanted to invite you on the podcast. So appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. It's always a wild ride when people are just starting to learn about esports and they have all these questions, and it always feels good to be on some of these things and validate the sport and continue to show people that it's just like traditional sports. It really is.
I'm excited to get into all that. How about we kick it off and I want to learn a little more about your journey as well.
Oh boy.
Will you share with the listeners, like, how did you get here? What's your day to day look like as a head coach of an esports team at LTU?
Okay. Uh Everybody that's in esports is going to have a wildly different answer for how they got there because it's so new. Nobody went through what would be considered a normal pipeline of I was a T-ball coach and then I got hired at the high school and then the college, and now I'm a professional esports coach. That doesn't exist for us. So my journey starts in education. So it's been really, really an easy transition for me because I was a middle and high school teacher for 11 years. And where I'm from in Kentucky, the high school esports scene is sanctioned by the state. It's like one of a few states that have it sanctioned. So it's on the same level as football, basketball, baseball, tennis. I can't remember all 13 of them. So when it began in 2020 or 2021 and the state sanctioned it, my school, which is a private school, saw this as a recruitment generator. And so they said, who wants to do this? And I've been an esports fan and a avid video game player for a really long time. I was like, I'll do it. I know the scene really, really well. Let me just take this on. And we won a state title in our first year. They hung a
Nice.
banner. I have a gaudy ring that you get when you
Let's
win
go.
one of those. They paid for it. It was great. So we did all of that, and a local university called Bellarmine University, which is in Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm from, was like, "Hey, we're interested in kind of seeing what this thing is about. Why don't you teach an adjunct class on esports? We're looking to do this. We're looking to add it to our sports management curriculum." I said, "Sure. I have a master's in education, so I know what I'm doing as far as that department goes, and probably one of the best people who know the scene in the area. So yeah." And then that worked out. They hired me full time. We wrote a minor in esports for their sports management department. And during that time, my wife and I had our first kid, Gemma, who's almost 3 in April. And she's from Detroit. And she was like, "We're moving." I was like, "We're moving." So now we're up here in South Detroit, in Lawrence Tech University is in that same region. So I'm super happy because esports jobs are rare. There are not that many of them. I think there's I don't know, how many colleges are there out there? 4,000, something like that.
Yeah.
It's probably 10% of those universities
Wow.
that have, you know,
An esports
esports
program.
program. Yeah, that are sufficient and can field a full-time person. So I'm really, really lucky, and it's been an amazing job. What is my job is also an interesting question because I act more like an athletic director or a general manager than I do head coach. That's one thing that's wild about this whole sport is when you start it, usually there are multiple titles that are offered. So there's lots of video games that have competitive aspects, and there's only, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 that are supported with a league that continues in the collegiate landscape. So you have a few of them, and there's no way you would hire one coach to coach basketball, baseball, tennis, and golf and expect them to know all of those things and be very good at them. Yes, there's absolutely, overlap between what a coach does there, but ultimately my job is to organize things. We have 7 assistant coaches for our 7 titles that we have. I expect them to know those games inside and out, be a part of those communities, and run practices and matches. So I am very rarely the one making decisions in game. That is almost exclusively to our assistant coaches who have to keep up with the changes, which is another thing we're gonna eventually have to talk about is the fact that someone owns these games, whereas nobody owns basketball.
Right.
So
That
that's a
is
I have a great analogy for when we want to get into that, but it's a wild. You have to be so fluid in this industry and ready for anything because the next week your game could change.
yeah. Okay, well, don't lose it. Write it down. I
All right,
want to get
I
there,
got
but
it.
I want to dig into one thing because um, when, on the hours, we really like to get to a place of application as much as possible. So let me share with everyone listening. What Ben just described as far as his role is actually what I observe as one of the greatest weaknesses of most of the high school coaches that we work with, and one of the greatest opportunities. And what that is zooming out, being a general manager, identifying strengths in your assistants, and assigning them ownership over aspects of your program. So, regardless of what sport you're coaching, most head coaches hold on too tightly to every small detail, don't empower their assistants. Their assistants aren't very clear on their job description. They're just kind of there waiting to be told in the moment what to do. And so the more you can GM and put the right people in the right seats on the bus, that's from players to admin to boosters to your feeder youth programs to your assistants, you're going to be more successful. So, Ben, let me just ask you that what is one thing that you've done in that kind of athletic director or GM mode that you think is valuable that other coaches could maybe try to grow into?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the delegation side of things, and trusting them, and making sure that you have a very complete plan, overarching plan over your entire whatever, how big your umbrella is. And then that's what your initial meetings include. And I really liked, and I'm starting to use this. The last meeting you guys talked about, like defining what your actual success is because it's going to be different for every school and for every program, where you're really going to find the joy of the thing because only one team gets to win.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. I mean, there's only one national champion or there's only one champion, so everybody else has got to do this right as well in case you don't win because it's only one school. So you have to find where your success is. So we have so many different metrics of success, at least in our department of like, what are our retention rates? Did we do value adds that make this a community people want to come back to, regardless of winning status? Um, and for us in esports, I mean, it's all about validating this new thing, and getting students and players to recognize like this was serious and you change the relationship with this game, and you enjoyed doing it and you would come back and help and donate and all these other other metrics that I wouldn't define as success, but it helps for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad you referenced the work we're doing with LTU. So, for everyone listening, LTU is one of the programs that we work with. We do coach development with their entire athletic department, and it looks different for every program that we work with. But with LTU, we're doing once a month live training for every coach across every sport. And it's, I think we've had three. We're working the whole year. And I love you talk about the V in SAVI victory, which is defining the victory for yourself. And I love that you've embraced that. And again, coaches, I would encourage you, like Ben said, most teams end in disappointment if their only metric for success is winning a championship. And so, if that is your only metric for success, you're going to actually spend most of your coaching career frustrated and disappointed. And so, what we teach at Savvy is like have very clear wins, the things that you can control, not just the outcomes. And we hear about this all the time. We're like, okay, trust the process, or whatever. But in actuality, I think it's very practical, and we can even relate it into leading your program. And so, three steps that I found really helpful in being a general manager of your program as a head coach is one, have a really clear objective for each of your assistants and each of your players. Like, here is your objective. Here's what you can own. Here's what you can really latch onto. Leadership comes from ownership. Every coach I talk to is like, oh, I want more leaders. Well, it's really hard for someone to develop as a leader if they have no ownership. right? They don't see anywhere they can lead. So one, that objective is they own that objective, which will grow their leadership. Two, make sure that you have success criteria that's measurable, right? So here's what you own, and here's the benchmarks that are success for you, whether that be an assistant coach, whether that be a player on your team that owns warm-ups, whether that be a booster that is putting on an event, right? Here is the measurement that we're going to define as success. And then three, provide consistent encouragement and feedback. So often I see head coaches that just like set it and forget it. And at the end of the year, they're like, okay, well, you did a bad job, you're fired, right? Or, okay, you did a good job, and so I'll retain you. And most of the year, coaches, players, anyone that you're leading are sitting there wondering, am I even doing it right? But we do a local academy, basketball academy here. And so we get kids coming from their high school season to our academy club, season. And consistently, what each player says is, oh, I gone through the entire season and my coach didn't even talk to me. Or I went through the entire season and my coach never told me how I was doing. Like, we love that you're constantly telling us what we're doing well and what we need to improve. Players, the assistants you lead, they crave feedback. That's why they're a part of a team. They want to get better. And so, like, giving consistent and clear coaching instead of like holding things in that you see because you don't want to offend someone, is not the way to improve. So I'll throw it to you, Ben, and ask this: like, what are things that you tend to encourage your athletes and coaches in an esport world, right? Like what do you coach them in doing? Like, hey, this is good. And what sort of feedback or coaching do you give? What are the buckets there?
Huh. It depends on the game because
Okay.
we do run 7 of them. So it depends. We obviously have to get a baseline of some kind. So it's obviously one of the big goals of our assistant coaches who focus on each individual game to go, hey, what is our team doing well and what are they not doing well, and then define the practice schedule to min max is what we call it in video games, is to minimize the things that we're not good at and maximize the things that we are good at. So if it is, I don't know, I'm trying to use a basketball, like if I know my percentage of free throws is low, what should my practice schedule look like? Probably more free throws and specific training on how to do that properly. And we all know they should be doing underhand, but nobody does because
Let's
it looks.
go.
I will never forget that analogy because I've heard it before, even before that meeting, and I was like, I've heard that, and I knew that, and I knew the statistic was because
Much
it was
better.
better. It was a better statistic if you did it that way. So we do that. That's the like kind of the first thing, especially for our assistant coaches who have to focus so heavily on skill-based things. Like what I'm learning now and what are the questions that I was going to kind of bring up to you is because so many esports coaches come from drastically different backgrounds. My struggle has been with tilt. These students and these players are so used to the game just being fun and they're playing with their friends. And the moment they join a high school team or a college team, and then there's real pressure. And it's not just like I'm just playing for fun. Somebody who, isn't my friend is telling me when to play, how to play. There's a very big shift, and we lose a lot of players who are like, just play in my residence hall or my dorm, and I'll join the team. And as soon as the coach is going, no, you're doing this wrong, that's uncomfortable for some of these esports players. So what I have struggled with, and I'm researching, I literally bought like 3 or 4 like motivation books, and like, I mean, the inner game of tennis, you can't beat it. It's been a staple for 50 years, right? And I played tennis, so I knew about that book. And now I'm like, I'm gonna read this because I had players who have what we call ladder anxiety. If you play, any kind of video game, you understand that there's a ranking system in each of these games, and you could play on your own to increase your ranking, which is not something you could do in basketball and baseball. You can't just like go play a pickup basketball game and suddenly your star rating for your recruitment level goes up. That doesn't exist in traditional sports, but in esports, these kids are playing ranked games, what they call them, and moving up and down the ranking system that way. And they get like anxiety when they go down in ranking, and then it affects their team when they play with us, our team. So how do you handle that other than just me like reading more of these books and trying to implement things on a smaller scale for each of these players and figuring out like where is the mental block? But that's the thing for me, I can kind of control overarch. I can't know these games as well as my assistant coaches, but I can motivate. I can have their mindset correct. Every time they're in the room, I can go, "Hey, how are you thinking about this?" That's where the big struggle for me is a skill because I didn't have to learn that as teacher.
Right. Okay, good. I'm that's a very, very good question that's going to help a lot of coaches. Let me just quick zoom out and say, like, have you watched the show Ted Lasso?
Of course.
Of course. Can you call yourself a coach if you haven't watched Ted
It's
Lasso?
an amazing show outside of coaching, but yes,
It's
I
amazing. No,
also agree. Dude, I
yes,
might base my whole persona on that thing because it's the correct way to be a leader. It's not even about coaching. Like it's about like, hey, do you want to be a good leader in any position of leadership? So I don't know. Yes, of course.
beautiful. And so, like, he knows nothing about soccer or football, and then he goes and is very successful in coaching a sport that he doesn't have technical knowledge about because he was so good at we'll call them soft skills, at these things that lead directly to performance. And if one takeaway from our time together here for coaches is grow your skills as a general manager and as a more of an athletic director of your program by delegating and training and dispersing ownership. If that's lesson one that we can learn from you, Ben, and esports coaching, I'm going to say from this time, lesson two is this: spend more time on soft skills and less time on what we're going to call like technical skills, because a player's performance will not be capped by their skill set. It will be capped by their mindset. And we see that across every single sport. Most every competitive athlete underperforms their skill set in high pressure situations, right? So, like when they're completely in a flow state and loose and free, they're at a 10. But because of pressure and the degradation of a game, they actually perform at whatever, a 6. And the closer that athlete can get to performing to 10, well, the more likely they are a star player. Star players aren't star players because of their skill set, it's because of their mindset. There's something in their makeup and their preparation that allows them to perform at a greater capacity. So, how do we help them do that? How do we have them not fall victim to ladder anxiety? I've never heard that word, but I love it. I'm using it. Thank you so much. Here is what I would suggest. Then I'll give a very practical tool. The most common response by a coach is they have ladder anxiety or they are comparing. So we have to remove that thing, that ladder, that right. So like an example of this, Ben, is I actually teach basketball coaches to establish a shooting ladder, which attempts to do what is done automatically in esports. It attempts to actually have them go out and come back from
Ranking.
practice. It ranks them according
Yep.
to their one aspect, one skill set, right? And the reason I believe so strongly in this shooting ladder, and if it was easy, I would do it in other skills, is because it normalizes that anxiety that they might feel in a game. So they actually have to deal with it daily, as opposed, and so they can get better at it.
Right.
But removing it doesn't prepare them when they're going to have to deal with it when they are under the lights, right? So don't remove it, like ignore it, don't talk about it, don't let it bother you. Okay, that does not work. What I believe works is this, and I'm going to give this really practical tool. I'm going to give a big shout out to one of my mentors. Her name is Shawnee Harley. She is a mental skills coach. She works with Olympians and high performers. You can look her up online. I'll drop a link in the show notes down below. Shawnee Harley was a college basketball coach for many years and then went and was an Olympic basketball coach for Team Canada. And now is a mental skills coach. I'm fortunate enough she actually lives in Phoenix. She came and spoke to our academy recently, and she gave the players this tool. And I've been using this tool ever since. Every player has two voices in their head constantly. The first voice is the voice of fear. And everyone knows the voice of fear because the voice of fear doesn't shut up. The voice of fear is very loud. And the voice of fear looks at that ladder and then speaks to the anxiety. You're not as good as the person above you. Everyone else can see that you're not in first place. Everyone thinks that you're actually overrated. No matter where you are on the ladder, the voice of fear is screaming at you. And so we cannot ignore the voice of fear. It's natural to humanity. And what we actually have to do, and it's actually a mental practice, is like in your mind, you actually have to visualize. You have to visualize actually removing the microphone. Like you give a microphone to this voice of fear. You remove it, you take the microphone away from the voice of fear, and instead you choose to hand that microphone to your voice of courage, right? It's okay, what do you have to say? Because the voice of courage is quiet and the voice of courage isn't constantly speaking. You have to seek out the voice of courage. You have to choose the voice of courage, right? And you're not going to get the voice of fear to be quiet, but you can turn up the voice of courage and choose to listen. Okay. So like in the exercise that Shawnee did, and I would even run this little exercise with a team. And so after you explain this, everyone understands it. And you say, okay, everyone share with the person next to you, what are the things that your voice of fear says to you? And they share. And then you say, okay, is anybody willing to share what their voice of fear is saying? And they raise their hands and they share some things. And here's what's interesting. It was not hard to get players to identify what their voice of fear said. They knew it immediately, right? Like you and I probably know it. Even as coaches, we have this as well, right? It's like, and I'm sure like what would for you as a coach and a leader, what does your voice of fear say?
I mean, it's all about that validate. It's all about that proof of concept. It's just like, did we do a good enough job? Like we have a rare opportunity to be in athletics here, and that's not normal across the ecosystem. So we have a chance to continue to prove that this is something, and that's a lot of pressure because otherwise, other schools won't get this opportunity if it's not successful here or all the other places where it's in full blown full athletic status. Then what shot do all these other schools who are just starting out and like their players are their coach or their entire team is just run by student in an RSO or student organization. So what chance do we have to convince these other university admin that this has a lot of value in a lot of metrics if we aren't doing it right? So that's the pressure that I kind of feel is like I, the whole weight of the collegiate esports scene on our shoulders here.
Yeah,
The
I hear you.
future,
And I'm sure every coach listening right now is like, the moment we said voice of fear, what's keeping you up at night. You know what's in your head, right? I mean, for me, I recently got an opportunity. Someone requested for me to apply to a college coaching job. I haven't coached college basketball in 16 years, and I haven't really wanted to. And this one was a unique, and like I kind of thought about it. I was like, this one might be something I would do. And immediately my voice of fear spoke up. Oh, but what if you went there and didn't do well, and you're teaching all these coaches how to coach, and you didn't even do well? Like immediately the voice of fear just comes up, right? And so we did that exercise. I encourage all coaches to do this with team. Then we said, okay, what would your voice of courage say? I want everyone to actually, in your mind's eye, hand that microphone to voice of courage, and what would they tell you? Like, and when you're in a game, when you're at the free throw line, shooting some pressure free throws, when you're, whatever moment might be in an esports game, which I'm not familiar with, what would they tell you? And then you had to share that with the person next to you, 30 seconds. And then Shawnee asked, okay, what are some things that your voice of courage would say? And people had a hard time sharing because they didn't know their voice of courage,
right?
right?
It's not an
And so
exercise you normally do.
it's a muscle that is weak. It's
Mhm.
not an exercise you do. And so the magic of that exercise and of doing that exercise daily, whether it be in a time of self-reflection or journaling or even a led visualization that's led by a coach, which coaches ask me all the time, oh yeah, I want my team to visualize. What do we visualize? Just do this for a week straight, right? Visualize handing the microphone to the voice of courage and listening to what the voice of courage is and writing it down for 2 minutes at the beginning of practice or the end of practice. It will strengthen it so they'll know the voice of courage when they need to. And I guarantee you, when an athlete is in a high pressure situation and they're grasping at anything that can give them a shred of confidence, they're going to go back to this seemingly silly exercise and be like, voice of courage, microphone, and it will give them something to hold on to. And so I think that that would be one of many exercises that I would throw out to you and our coaches to help improve the mental performance, the mindset and approach of players.
Right. And,
Yeah.
so reminding me a lot of that old like Cherokee two
Yeah.
wolves kind of thing. Like it's the one you feed is the one who's going to win the fight, right? So it's
Yes.
very similar. of like, it sounds to me like athletes just feed the fear nonstop because that's what we're, constantly doing. But in this case, yeah, we gotta learn to think the different way, the opposite way.
Let me ask you this from my end, final question, and then anything that you want to close off with and share to educate our coaches and leaders about what you do or encouragement or whatnot. If you had to articulate your why, like why do you coach? What would be your motivation? What gets you up in the morning to
Oh, that's
continue
easy.
to serve and lead?
So easy.
Okay,
Specifically for my generation, I'm 36 now, so I'm a millennial. When I was growing up, video games was not cool. Like you kind of like kept that to yourself in a lot of ways. Even if you were a big video game player, but what the why for me personally is that now that it's not just like normalized, it's kind of cool. I want to make sure that that group of people who normally would not get a chance to play sports. So a lot of these kids are not sports players, and now they have that, and it is a different kind of validation. It's an underserved group of people, and it's the underserved group of people who needed it maybe even the most. So there's that, and I'm telling you now it's super. I had a top player who was the center snapper for the football team, and the football team was a huge supporter of him as an esports athlete, which would have never happened
yeah,
before that. And we've got a player on our team, on our football team. He's our kicker. He's an all-star player, but he's also 25th in the nation in one of the video games, and he plays for us in the spring, and it's our WAC title, so it's like our conference season. So thankfully it wasn't in the fall because I mean he's just going to choose football, and that's what happened with our high school football player as well. But that is the why for me, is like just to continue, even if I couldn't be on an esports team because it didn't exist in 2006 in college and I couldn't get a scholarship. That's the chance that I get to have for the rest of my career, is to continue. We get to go to signing days,
yeah,
do a signing day for esports and watch those kids like shine because they
light
would have
up.
never would have been able to do that before.
Yeah, that's a powerful why. And even as you said it, it even continued to grow my perception and perspective on esports. Because I mean, we know what valuable lessons are learned and confidence is developed
Yeah.
through sports. And you're right, there are so many people that just because they can't kick a football will might miss out if not for this opportunity and everyone finding what they're good at in their place, and then they can apply that to everything they do for the rest of their lives, which is why I coach coaches as well now, and why I coached basketball initially is we just love to see those aha moments. What the aha moment is in doesn't matter, but that's why we lead. So that's a beautiful thing.
I'm gonna even throw an additional one at you because it's not even just skill based. Some of these kids, and I do say kids because I'm referring to like middle and high school kids here, maybe have disabilities that would have never been able to do traditional sports, right? I have a personal one where I had a friend of mine whose kid was struggling with like health issues, and he was able to play Super Smash Brothers, which is a handheld on a handheld console, in waiting rooms for the hospital, and got good enough to play for his high school team. And then it could potentially get a scholarship in that way. So this is not even just like, oh, they're just not even good enough to throw the ball, fast enough in baseball. It's like, this is a kid who would never been able to play traditional sports, period, because they just have that limitation, but not in
Yeah,
esports.
it's beautiful. All right, well, how about you get us out of here on this? What's one final thought that you have for coaches, or you want to share about esports? Anything that you want to finish up with?
I think those powerful points right at the end there really kind of define it. Of like, just remember, if you're starting to hear about this esports thing, all of the things that you would cherish in traditional sports, the communication, the community, the the discipline that you would get from traditional sports, they do apply here. And that's why it's so important to not just kind of shrug it off to the side as like, okay, you guys are just playing video games. Well, your game is to put a ball in a hoop too. It is just a game, but when you create these communities and these structures around it, there are so many other value adds to sports, and in this case esports, that we shouldn't ignore, and we want to focus on those really heavily, in our case, because that's what really defines, validation in sports world in general. So yeah.
That's really good. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Ben, and I appreciate you jumping on. It's really it's awesome to see coach hearts in things other than basketball. Like a coach's heart is a coach's heart, and I can see it in you. And so I just celebrate everything that you're doing, and I'm thrilled for all the people that you get to lead. We'd love for you guys that are listening. If you ever want to reach out, we'll actually we'll put Benjamin's info on the bottom as well. If you want more information about this, because I know Ben, you're on a mission to share this and grow this sport. And so we're here to help as well.
I'd be happy to talk to any of your admins. I mean, I've gotten pretty good at explaining this stuff to a lot of different stakeholders. So I know there's definitely key words to use in those kind of meetings. So be more than happy if someone's interested in learning more about this. We could go for a lot longer. I got hours and hours of this stuff. So
Hey, we might have to have you back and
all
do it
right,
again.
anytime.
Thank you. We'll do it. Thank you for listening. As always, that's been. I'm Tyler. Until next time, stay savvy.
Thanks, guys.